Tulam tanam tanam asilena yesizim. Tulam tanam tanam asilena yesizim. Tulam tanam tanam asilena yesizim. Tulam.
I'm Des van Rooyen. My full and official names are David Douglas Des van Rooyen. I was born in a small farm area called Moeketsi. It's 25 kilometers from Vennesdorp. And then my upbringing was in a small farming area 20 kilometers from Vennesdorp called Ratsagone. Ratsagone is a farming area which is neighboring a farm which was owned by Eugene Terreblanche parents. So I grew in that farm, and that was from the age of 1 up to I think up to 7 years. When I was 7 years, my parents married and they relocated to Kagiso, which is a township of Carltonville, and then I had to join them. I joined my parents when I was doing Standard 1. It was called Standard 1 then, which is your grade 3 now. So as I arrived in Kagiso, I think it was towards 1976 when I arrived in Kagiso, and in 1976 what was happening in other parts of the country, more especially in Soweto, somehow influenced some residents in Kagiso, and there was an attempt to ban the beer halls in Kagiso. I observed that while I was still young, and I must indicate that nothing major happened thereafter in Kagiso. And I schooled in Pororo, it's a primary school in Kagiso. I must confess I had some identity problems when I arrived in Kagiso, because most of my contemporaries look at me as a barrier, as a barrier, as a Vennesdorp. So I was more of what is called a plastic to them. So to prove that I can be superior to them, those who schooled with me in Pororo know very well that I was good at stabbing other scholars with a pen or any other object that I could lay my hands on. So that's how I managed to create a mark in that Standard 1. And that happened at the expense of my studies. I failed Standard 1 as a result of my loss of focus. But ultimately I achieved the recognition that I felt was highly undermined by my contemporaries. But unfortunately, my contemporaries proceeded to Standard 2, as I had to repeat my Standard 1. And most unfortunately, what compounded my situation, my younger sister, my late younger sister, Hermina Maditawa van Rooyen, caught up with me at Standard 1. So that was the biggest challenge, because now the recognition that I enjoyed by stabbing people with pen or any other object was not sustainable. Now I had to deal with the issue of fighting for my recognition as a brother to my younger sister. So that motivated me a lot, and as of that year, I became one of the best performers to be produced by Pororo. primary school, and I never looked back, hence my passion on education. But then I must indicate that I completed my studies in Pororong in 1983. Then I moved to a high school called Bethel High in the Bodensteen, which is also not that far from Venestop. I wanted to be a medical doctor, and it was difficult for our parents to send us to such boarding schools there. They had to decide between me and my younger sister as to who should go to Bethel. So Bethel by then was very notorious of the so-called treatment of newcomers. They used to call us Minyete. So my sister was very quick to agree that I must go to Bethel so as she can go to the local school, which is Badirile. So that's how then it was easy for my parents to support my request to go to boarding school so as I can be a medical doctor. So when I reached Bethel, remember when I was in Venestop, maybe before I get to Bethel, I just want to narrate on my political influence. In Venestop, Ratzagai, our neighbor, son, Eugene Terablanche, was literally harassing our black people in Venestop, and we were not exempted, even young as we were. We were from time to time victims of his unfortunate treatment on black people. So that made me, at that early age, to start questioning the whole system governing our country. That was the apartheid system. But then, our parents were not that open, because I was brought up then in Venestop by my late grandparents. So they were very economical with information. They didn't tell me a lot about this brutality. But unfortunately, I went through that brutality firsthand, and I experienced it, and that built an attitude in me. So when I was at Bethel, I'm just trying to link this thing. But also, remember, in Kutsong, I spoke about the June 16 influence in our township. And of course, that made me also to ask further questions around what is happening in the country. But of course, that line of questioning was not sustained because then it was difficult to get appropriate information. But when I was at Bethel High School, I met an operative of Umkhondo Wesizwe, Comrade Peterson. That was his combat name. And he immediately recruited me to distribute literature because he realized that I was very influential among my contemporaries, but also I liked reading. In fact, where I met him, it was in the library. So while in that process of distributing banned literature, because I carried banned literature from Bethel to Kuzo and other areas in the West Rand. Your Begestal. Begestal then was very strong with the Azapo chapter. We used to call them the Zemzem chapter. So my assignment as someone who was a proponent of Freedom Charter, still a proponent of Freedom Charter, was to infiltrate Begestal and Ramfontein and Krugersdorp with that banned literature. I didn't even ask the source of that banned literature, as given to me by Comrade Peterson, who was from Dobsonville. So while in Bethel, that was in 1985, there was a strong Xhosa's emergence in Potchefstroom, Ikageng Township. So most of the learners at Bethel were coming from Ikageng. And among them, there were those like Bodike, Sidike, Molaba Hepi, whom we later established that was an informer, and many others who were very instrumental in terms of establishing courses in the Bethel High School. So the approach was very simple. Peterson insisted that I must avail myself for leadership position. But because Peterson was an operative of Mkondwesi, so in that school, Bethel, he took a back seat. He was never in the leadership of courses, but he insisted that I must participate in courses. Well, then I was very young. They used to call me a pioneer. So I became the leader of a branch called Courses Pioneer at Bethel High School. And I must tell that happened without any support from my parents. They didn't, more especially my mother, my late mother, they didn't understand my decision then. Because remember, I was an A student at Bethel High School. So he couldn't understand why I sacrificed my studies for the struggle of the students, you know. It was difficult for my mother to understand. I remember at some stage there was an offer of a scholarship for me to go to America. But the problem which I had with this scholarship is that it had a one condition that they didn't work well with me. They wanted me to abandon my membership of courses to accept this scholarship. I refused. Because then the situation was very bad at Bethel High School. Our parents were paying exorbitant money. Then it was exorbitant money, that's what they were paying for us to be schooled there. The food was not good. Our first campaign at Bethel High School was to boycott I remember very well the Friday menu of Malamohodi, which was not properly washed. You know? So my mother didn't understand, but why these things? I said, but no, Mom, it's not about myself. It's about the system. Because, you see, I said to those who offered me this scholarship, because Bethel then it was a still missionary school under the ownership of Lutheran Church. But then the principal was Radi Mayers. If you are to Google the Radi Mayers of this world, those are proper agents of the oppressive system in South Africa, if not in the world. So it was clear that Bethel was this platform which was, among other things, meant to recruit those who were looked at as brainy or clever kids for a foreign institution, of course, with obvious reasons of turning them into agents of the imperialist system, you know. So I refused. And that I must tell, that didn't work well with my mother. My mother, they had to drive. I remember they drove from Bethel to collect my mother here in Kutso. From a three-room house to boarding school, where they wanted her to convince me to abandon my membership of courses and take this scholarship. Little did I know that this scholarship, I will tell you the story, how did I establish that this scholarship was a CIA-sponsored scholarship. And by then, little did I know that this was a CIA scholarship, but the condition that came with the scholarship was the only reason why I didn't accept that scholarship. But my mother was saying, but we don't have money. Take the scholarship, then you'll be a doctor. But I said, no. I've identified something seriously wrong with our educational system. We are not awarded on the basis of merit, you know. We are awarded on the basis of race or on the basis of us betraying our people. I'm not going to accept that. So, well, my mother went back home. Of course, I didn't deliver to expectation. And I continued leading courses. I was arrested. I think when I did, it was Form 3 then. I had to prepare for my exams while in prison. I think I was arrested for, if I'm not mistaken, 29 or 30 days in Lichtenberg holding cells. But that happened after that food boycott that we initiated or that we led at Bethel High School. So I was arrested here, by the way, I must indicate, from our township, from Kutzom. It was myself, Ronit Zahani, who's currently the principal of the School of Disability Biteko, and a lady by the name of Sonti Sididi. I think she works at Mohale municipality now. So we were, from Kutzom, the three of us were part of those who were arrested. I remember very well Sonti was doing matric there. So she had, and many others, they had to prepare for their exams, matric exams, while in holding cells of Lichtenberg. We passed, and what was good was that the likes of Sonti and those who were doing matric passed with distinctions while they prepared for the examination in prison. We also passed, albeit not with distinctions, because it was hard for us to prepare under those conditions. But what happened, very interestingly, 1986, I want to go and do my Form 4 then. That's what grade 11 now. They accepted me at Bethel, myself and Roni Zahani, they accepted us. And you know, the first thing that we did successfully as COSAS, we banned that treatment that was there in Bethel. In fact, the last year when treatment was there was in 1985. But 1985, we launched COSAS, and then one of the first things that we did is to fight for the scrapping, successfully so, of that treatment, because it didn't make sense to us. But then we turned it into our favor. As part of the induction, we created a platform as COSAS to recruit these newcomers to be members of COSAS. And that didn't go well with the school management there. So I think I spent only 3, if not 4 days, 1986 at Bethel. Accepted, by the way. My parents have paid, I think, for the first quarter. Then at night I was arrested with Ronit Zahani for trespassing. How do I trespass? How foolish was the apartheid machinery? How do I trespass when I was admitted at school? You trespass where you are not allowed. I was allowed. And payment was done by my parents. I was allocated a room. But that's why we were arrested in the same room, allocated to us by the school management. And the church, the school was saying we're trespassing. What a foolish charge. But I think they wanted just to create the grounds for us to be expelled from the school, which happened because we went for trial and we won. Both cases, by the way, were won. We were then represented by popular lawyers, the late Priscilla Jana, and the current ANC lawyer, Mr. Krishna Idu. Those were the best lawyers then for us as the students, you know. So we won both cases. In the one, I think that the first one was harassment, intimidation, a lot of cases that they brought against us. But the second one was specifically trespass. But of course, we won those cases. And then in 1996, I was forced to come to Kuto to join my younger sister, Badila High School. I was expelled from Bethel then in 1986, and I went to Padirile. But I must indicate, for me to be accepted at Padirile, it was not an easy process. Because the big question was, why did I left Bethel High School? Because Bethel High School then was somehow regarded as one of those, prestigious schools. But I know the principal of Badirile, that Mr. Senne, was very close to the apartheid system. I know that very well. So the resistance might have been triggered by his proximity to the system. So after some resistance, they ultimately, because I was told openly that I shouldn't bring my political activism to Badirile. Badirile was a bit quiet there. Then I accepted, but remember I was very angry that I missed an opportunity to complete my high school at Bethel High School. And truly speaking, I was not looking forward to be at Badirile. But now I wanted to complete my studies. I had no choice. But remember, what came as a consolation to me was the fact that Badirile was a fertile, after 2 days of my stay there, I realized Badirile was a fertile ground for me to kickstart our program of changing the system. And from nowhere, it all started under my leadership. Of course, we brought Badirile to a halt. Because I came to Badirile when learners at Badirile had problems with the school management under the leadership of Mr. Sen. So they were afraid of Mr. Sen. I was still young, very, very young. You can even see my pictures when I went to exile. I was very, very young. It took me just to take a stone during an assembly session and throw that stone on the roof of a school when Senna was addressing us to disrupt Badirile. All those who believe that Senna was this untouchable, as of that day, the whole thing changed. And as of that day, Badirile was like a center for political inspiration. Yeah, Kuzo, but also in the Western, but also in Transvaal, both Western Transvaal and PWV. They knew that if you want real comrades in Kuzo, you must go to Badirile. So the school was closed just after 3 months. If people tell you that I schooled at Badirile, just tell them that it was only for 3 months. Because that was the last time I was at Badirile. The school was closed, and thereafter we were forced into the street, and we started working then with the likes of Opera Moeketsi, Tsietsi Makunya, Nonze Makasibi. The list is endless. These are our senior people. Tate de Lane, Tate Lohwaite, Andres Lohwaite, Rush Park Lohwaite. We work with those to create a civic structure. And the late Dr. Tsupe, Malcolm Tsupe. Malcolm Tsupe played a very important role in cracking the resistance that was in the so-called the professional sector. He was a medical doctor, the people's doctor. They were treated, they got credit, so this was the doctor who was able to infiltrate the education sector. The education sector teachers were very, very anti our course when it all started in Kuzo. But through Malcolm, because I think it's a question of it's a status issue, where they feel that we are just too dirty to be associated with it. They call us failed pops there. That's how we're called. They call us failed pops. At some stage they call us Sanyovas. But remember, all these things was also perpetuated by the powerful apartheid-owned media. This labeling was one way of, making us look like scarecrows, or maybe making us look as these people who can't be associated with. So Dr. Tsupe played that role, but then we started a civic organization with them. Then we outreach with the help of Comrade Opera Moeketsi and Comrade Tom Moeketsi. Comrade Moeketsi was a rooted communist from Ikage. So we started, but they were working in the mines. So these are the people who obviously liaise between us as community structures in Khutso. But then we are called mass democratic structures in Khutso. With they lies between us and NUM specifically. We work direct with the late Elijah Bahai, and I'm so happy because he didn't decide when he passed on. He didn't decide to go to Crack Dog. He said, "No, I belong here. All my life I've been here. And my struggles were waged here in Khutso and Carltonville. That's why he's buried here. He was not taken back to the Eastern Cape. He's buried here in Carltonville graveyard or cemetery. We work with them. Elijah Bahai, Mr. Manyosi from Lebote in the Eastern Cape, Mr. Moeketsi, James Moeketsi, Ramaphosa himself, the current president, but while the current president was an office person, he was not in our, most of the time in the programs that we champion in Khutso. Mr. I mentioned Moeketsi, yeah? And Mr. Patwe, yeah, Mr. Patwe. Those are the key trade unionists. And later on, we had the likes of, there are many who came after from NUM. And some of them became prominent politicians in the political landscape of South Africa, coming from Carltonville. So we work with them, we champion many programs here in Khutso, but also in Beggestan. There was a notorious campaign that was led by NUM in Beggestan. The Boers used to call it Virus de Basakop, where mine workers were killed a white police officer and they carried his head, paraded his head through the street of Beggestan. So Beggestan was sealed by defense force and police. They were looking for this virus. Every house where they were going, Virus de Basakop. That was after that campaign led by NUM, working with ourselves as progressive structures in the Beggestan and Khutso. I'm saying Beggestan and Khutso because Beggestan, we have to infiltrate Beggestan and assist our comrades there, the late Tapelo, to obviously turn things around. Because in Beggestan, Azazem was very, very strong. Azapo was very, very strong. But then we turn things around there, working with the likes of the late comrade Tapelo, who's a former Robben Islander, you know. So coming back to Khutso, I was the representative of UDF for Khutso National. I was very young. You know, I was working with the likes of Sister Bernard Ngube, my mentor, a political mentor, Tamidi Poko. And I think you must interview Tamidi Poko. Tamidi Poko is originally from Mohlakeng. Took me to some of those secret meetings. And I remember the first meeting, the meeting had to be stopped because Sister Bernard was not comfortable with this young man. Sister Bernard and the late Bayers Node, they were not comfortable with this young man who's in their meeting. Well, not even a young man, who's this child in our meeting. So Comrade Tammy, after I was taken outside the meeting, Comrade Tammy had to explain to them that without him, we are not going to get support in Khutso. So that's how I was allowed to participate in the meeting, in those meetings, you know. So I then represented my township then, because it was not about Carltonville or Merafong, it was about Khutso. I then defended my township in those meetings. And of course, we moved on to establish youth structures. In the Western, I was the leader in the Western of the youth structures. And of course here at home. And then we went on also to establish student structures. But by then I was not schooling here because of the harassment of the police. I had to go and school in Joburg. And in Joburg then I was being prepared to go to university. I schooled at a school called Interchurch College, which was also a college just created for people of my caliber. Those who are running away from the apartheid system. Remember, we are running away from apartheid system in all the 9 provinces, you know. So, but then they were not 9 provinces, but I'm just saying from all the corners of South Africa. So there was a school created, there were a few schools created specifically to cater for us. So I schooled at the one called Vets Interchurch, and which was preparing me to go to, because I wanted to pursue that idea of being a medical doctor. So I was schooling there in Joburg, but because of the harassment of the police, I had to stay in a place called Orange Farm in the Valley. I was staying in a plot which was extremely camouflaged. This was a plot, the plot of Orange Farm then, big grass, big trees, and there's an old mud house, a very dilapidated structure. I was staying in that structure, of course, to pursue my study, but also to continue with my underground operations, you know. So, but I was leading here. So my father passed on. As my father passed on, I had no choice. I think it was in the 80, if my memory serves me well, it was in 1988. You know, I had to come back. I'm a second born at home. I had to come back, but because my brother, of course, he was not in a position to provide for the family. So I had to come back to find a way to provide for the family under those difficult circumstances. So I spoke to the late Elijah Bahai, who was a senior NUM member and also working in Blackford, but he had strong influence in all the mines. So I was ultimately employed I was very young then. I was ultimately employed at LS Rand. I think today it's called Kusasa Leto. So I was employed there as a laborer because that's how the mines treated us in the past. You had to work underground before. The idea was for me to go to work at the plant, and that was the plan of the late Elijah Bahai. So as I can quickly generate some money for me to provide for the family, but to go back to school. That the mandate was very clear. So, but I continue leading in my community, the community of Kuzo. So working with those comrades that I've mentioned, you know. Then a lot happened in Kuzo. And everything that happened in Kuzo then was attributed to me. Police people were killed, you know, and it was like, this is their campaign, you know. So ultimately they established that I'm working in the mines, because the issue of me working in the mines was kept secret for almost 6 months. The police didn't know that I'm working in the mines. But then after a policeman was killed in Kuzo, and the campaign was like, it was a death campaign, they camped at LS Rand. By then I was still underground. So I'm told they wanted to wait there up until I complete my shift underground. But Kuzo was paying. Kuzo was paying, so they had to run back to Kuzo. So as they ran back, my leaders, because remember, the mining sector then was dominated by NUM leaders. They had to make a means of taking me out of, obviously terminating my shift abruptly, just to save me from these people, because they were not sure when are they going to come back. Or they might come back as I knock off. So I had to go to another level to catch an earlier lift for me to go out. And guess what? As I went out, I got the story, and I immediately went to the administration block of the mines. They used to call it the Masizas, or a block. I tendered my resignation because I knew that this time they are going to kill me. But also you must know, before all that happened, I was arrested and brutally tortured at Potchefstroom prison and here at Velfredin police station. I hope you have captured that area of Velfredin, because there's a lot of history, a lot of unfortunate stories that happened in that place, Velfredin, the police station. And I must confess, I was brutally tortured in Rastin. They kept me at Ramochana for 14 days. All those 14 days I was subjected to torture. So I came out of prison and continued with the struggle here at home. But now, unfortunately, my underground cell was exposed. And I had to go to then I was still a youth fleet member. I had to go to Peter Mukaba and Rapu Mulekane to say to them, I think things have changed. Our link has been exposed. So they said, you know what, if they arrest you this time, they're going to kill you. The best thing is for you to leave. So I then left, I left around, I think, 88, 89 to go outside. And I went to, of course, Mozambique. I stayed in Mozambique for 3 months, and Zambia. I stayed in Zambia, I think, for a year or so. Tanzania. That's where I received my military training, proper military training this time. And after that, when the CODESA negotiation started, I went to school because I believed that there was no need for us to be kept in the camps. We wanted to go to school to acquire skills because we were going to run a country. So I was taken to school, but my insistence was that majority of us must be taken to school. But of course the leadership has its own way of approaching things. So the only few of us were taken to school. So I went to school in Dar es Salaam. I did my 3-year diploma as an electronic technician. And then from there I came back here at home. I continued, because I was still young, continued to serve the youth league. But I served in the Defence Force for 6 years. I wasn't meant to be in the Defence Force to start with, because I never joined the struggle to be in the Defence Force. I joined just to liberate our country. So, but because, remember, when they negotiated the CODESA, it was about numbers. So I remember there was a special delegation that came to where I was schooling in Dar es Salaam to request us to avail ourselves as leaders in the military and to join our soldiers. So when we integrate, those numbers are also counted, or are also. The Defence Force, I enrolled for, because I wanted to start my businesses, so I enrolled for a course with Tameling. It was a bit expensive then. It's an executive course on business management diploma. I did that for 4 years. And of course it was meant to be, because it was an advanced diploma, it was meant to be 4 years while in the Defence Force. So I completed that, and on the day of my completion, as I dropped the pen, the following day I tendered my resignation to the Defence Force. And I decided now I'm ready to start my business. I opened a security company. We were appointed, of course, to guard 1 or 2 facilities. And then I was still active in the youth league. So I think it was towards local government election, the youth league decided that they want to fill me as the ward councillor. And they consulted with the elders in my community, that is Ward 9 in Kuzo. And they all agreed that I must be filled as a ward councillor. And I became a ward councillor. Immediately I became the member of the mayoral committee heading public safety in Merafong. And after 2 years, I was assigned to be the executive mayor of Merafong. And I became the mayor then up to my 2nd term. And 2 years before I completed my 2nd term, I was assigned to go to Parliament. But then the real of the matter is that a lot happened. I'm just trying to truncate the story during that time. You know, one of the key things that happened is the major decision of taking our constituency, the constituency of Merafong, to Northwest. The decision that was never supported by my collective, because we felt that economically we were more linked to Gauteng than Northwest. But our advice was not supported by the executive leadership of Gauteng, under the leadership of the then Premier, Bazima Shilowa. That was not supported, and we had even a clear mandate from the community, because I did an outreach to our people together with the team that I worked with, word by word in Kuzo, explaining this whole thing. And the message was very clear: we don't want to go to Northwest. So, but the leadership decided the way they decided, and there was no way in which we were going to disown our leaders' decision. Because our political teaching dictates that the center must hold, the rest must follow. That's what we call democratic centralism. So there was no way in which we were going to defy the ANC and take our own direction. No. So we had to bite the bullet and defended the party's position. And as we all know, it happened at a very, very serious cost to those who led Khutsong community. Those public representatives, their house were burned, you know, so it was not an easy one. So, but what I'm trying to say here is that during those days, the working relationship between the trade unions and community structures and political structures in Khutsong specifically, it was something that is not seen or maybe not realized today, and that's one thing that is missing. There was a strong relationship between labor movement and the community organizations in the townships. So, in a nutshell, I think that's what I can tell you about the history of our struggle.